By late afternoon on November 28, 2019, the DPP team of solicitors and barristers left the Criminal Courts of Justice in Dublin, the CCJ, having secured the first ever conviction in Ireland for female genital mutilation.
I remember I was crying and sad, and then two officers, they grabbed me, and I said, "Where am I going?" And they said, "You are guilty, and you're going to prison."
Inside the CCJ, Sayeed and Halawa's worlds were breaking apart.
When they brought us down to the ground floor, I heard my wife say, "Will we go in together?" She was crying and asking me, "Will we go to the same place at least?" And I said, "I don't know really."
Sayeed and Halawa were separated, each placed inside a basement holding cell, awaiting transfer to prison. On the outside, news of their conviction was beginning to echo around Ireland and the world.
A couple have been found guilty of female genital.
After a while, they called me and they said, "Let's go. You're going to prison, where you're going to stay."
The first trial of its kind in this country. The 37-year-old man and 27-year-old woman who cannot be named.
I'm Ruth Naga, from RTE Documentary on One and RTE Investigates. This is First Conviction. Episode 5, 750 Days. In the hours after their convictions, all Halawa could think about was her children and when she would see them again. She had no idea how her story was blowing up in the outside world.
Judge Elma Sheehan said the charges were of the most serious nature, so she did remand the couple in custody to await that sentencing. And she said in relation to the mother's children, with her youngest child, whom she's still breastfeeding, that position should be brought to the attention of the prison governor and appropriate measures should be put in place to allow her to care for her child.
As that news was being reported in RT's drive time, Halawa was on her way to the Docas Centre in Dublin, or as it's now known, Mountjoy Women's Prison, the largest female prison in Ireland.
And they put me in this room where they hold you while they're preparing a cell for you. And you have to stay there.
When you first arrive, you'll be brought to the committals unit. It's very frightening for the women when they first arrive and if it's an unfamiliar setting for them.
This is Claire Hargaden. At the time Halawa arrived in prison, Claire was working in the chaplaincy service at the Docas Centre.
And then you're moved to the healthcare unit in Docas for a while until it can be discerned where's the best place for you to go within the prison.
And I think the whole prison knew my situation anyway, before I went to that cell.
As Halawa settled into her first night in prison in central Dublin, her husband Sayeed had been taken to a jail in the west of Dublin.
They brought me to Cloverhill Remand Prison in, I think, Dublin 22. They brought me to Cell 4, C2 landing. That was a temporary prison only. I stayed there for 1 or 2 nights.
Right from the start, Sayeed was looking for a way out of prison.
I was thinking, we will fight this injustice. What we are going through. It's not the end, it's the beginning. I thought the truth will shine. We didn't commit any crime on our daughter. I went to sleep. In the morning, when I woke up, the first question I raised was, I want to talk to my children. And how is my wife?
In the following days, Sayeed was transferred to a closed, medium-security prison for adult males. But being black and having been convicted of a crime against his young daughter, things were never going to be easy.
And so I came to the Midlands prison. In less than 1 week, I went to many cells. Because the cell I would be told to stay in with someone, other people would tell them, kick him out. And the guy would get pressure. And he would have to kick me out. Then I would have to move to another cell. And that cellmate, again, he gets pressure from the landing groups. I have to go again. Ejected from that cell.
Sayeed was eventually placed in a cell on his own for a while. He had no contact with Halawa or their children. In her jail cell, Halawa was just like her husband. Lonely, anxious and confused.
And after, I think, 5 days, the chaplain, Claire, came to me, and I was telling her how I feel. And she asked me, like, what was happening? What was my situation? Where are your children? I said, I don't know.
After their conviction, Sayeed and Halawa's children had been placed in the care of Halawa's sister and her husband. The chaplain rang Halawa's sister, who came to visit and update her on her children.
The first message I got was from a priest.
The chaplain in Sayeed's prison also provided him with a glimmer of hope.
Who visited me in my isolation cell. I told him, please call my family. He used to give me small notes with messages about Halawa and the children.
As Halawa was still breastfeeding her youngest, she expressed milk several times daily, as prison chaplain Claire remembers.
I remember as well that she was a mother of a young baby coming in, and I was in a similar situation myself at the time with a young baby at home, and I remember that she was still breastfeeding, and I can't really fathom the distress of being separated from a baby that you're breastfeeding and the worry that would come with that.
I remember Claire used to come and talk to us, to me and another Muslim woman. She helped with the food. When we were fasting, we needed to eat our food later, and she helped us with that.
She was facing a lot, you know, to be black, to be Muslim, to be separated from all her children, and in particular a young baby, to not be familiar with how anything works.
She helped me to move to a safer place in the prison when I was being bullied. She would speak to the governor for us about things, about problems with bullying. She helped us a lot.
Having spent their first 61 days and nights in prison since being convicted and refused bail, on January 27th, 2020, Sayeed and Halawa were about to be told their prison sentences, handed down by Judge Elma Sheehan.
The 2012 Act carries a maximum sentence of 14 years, and count 2, the charge of cruelty, carries a maximum of 7 years.
All eyes were on this hearing, as it would set precedent in the first case of its kind in Ireland.
The true significance of what has occurred may not become apparent for years to come.
Judge Elma Sheehan gave a view on the alleged act of FGM by Sayeed and Halawa on their daughter Aisha.
The court views an inherent cruelty in the actions of a parent to facilitate such harm being done to a 21-month-old child. It is not an act born out of anger or a loss of self-control. It is an act which was carried out in a premeditated and planned manner, procuring the services of another to carry it out.
When Judge Sheehan considered the length of the sentence, she gave some context in how she reached her decision.
The court does not have available to it the most significant single mitigating factor, which is that of a plea of guilty to consider. In this case, as already outlined, the accused's explanation for their injury to their daughter was rejected by the jury and medical experts. They maintain that position today, which of course they are entitled to do. But as the court has already said, that lack of insight and lack of remorse is of concern to the court.
And then what everyone had come to hear. How long were Sayeed and Halawa being sent to prison for?
Taking mitigation into account in the case of Mr. The appropriate sentence is 5.5 years on count 1 and 3 years on count 2. And in the case of Ms. in relation to count 1, the appropriate sentence is 4 years 9 months on count 1 and 2 years and 9 months on count 2, noting that she did not go into evidence.
Sayeed and Halawa were devastated by the judge's decision.
Today's conviction and sentence represents the first of its kind in Ireland.
Directly after sentencing, Gardaí gave a press briefing.
Female genital mutilation cannot be tolerated in Ireland. It's a criminal offence, it's a barbaric practice. Ireland has a very long tradition of embracing customs or traditions from other countries. This practice is not one that we can extend a welcome mat to.
The following day's media coverage was extensive, with many commentators giving opinions, as well as investigating Gardaí giving views to the press.
This couple fought the case all the way, tooth and nail, if you like. The big concern is that if people come before the courts here again and plead guilty to these type of offences, they may receive much lighter sentences than today for what is, in essence, a truly shocking crime.
Chief Superintendent Declan Daly, who had spoken outside the court the previous day, also spoke on RTE Radio 1.
You know, I'm hopeful that yesterday's sentence will have, an impact on people's perception of the crime and a reduction in the practice. But my experience tells me that I think there's a little bit more that'll be required before we can eradicate this from our jurisdiction.
With their stories so widely reported, Sayeed and Halawa were now facing a new reality behind bars, as former prison chaplain Claire Hargaden knows well.
Coming into any prison with an offence against a child as your conviction makes you a target immediately. Prisoners with those convictions would try to suppress that information, but it always leaks out eventually, and prisoners do get access to media.
Halawa was totally unprepared for what was coming at her in prison.
They know. One woman was doing the middle finger to tell me they were going to kill me. They show me the scissors. We're going to kill you. You know how they bully.
We asked the Irish Prison Service about what records they had on file for allegations of bullying against Halawa and Sayeed in prison. And they told us,
in this case, the Irish Prison Service can confirm that it holds no records to substantiate the claims in your letter that either of the named individuals reported abuse, bullying or mistreatment of any kind.
Halawa was moved during her time in Dokas, but it didn't really change anything.
But as soon as I went out, they'd be shouting and they'd be saying, "Oh, here she's coming." And they were calling me names. Some of them were touching me straight away, saying Al-Qaeda. Some were saying black bitch. Some were saying child killer. Some were saying snip snip and bloody hands. Oh my God, too many names.
Down in the Midlands prison, Sayeed was also going through his own difficulties.
I told myself, now you are in this population, you have to stick with it. I cannot go out of my cell. When I am going for food, they bully me. On the landing, they call me names. I learned the hard way. I cannot even make a phone call because they block me from using the phone. It's a 6-minute call. You have to pay somebody, like a biscuit or a cigarette, the money of the prison. You have to buy yourself the call.
There was some hope on the inside that helped Sayeed see he could have a future. When he was moved to a different wing, some fellow prisoners began to give him advice.
I learned in prison that I can change my legal team and get a new team. I have that right. I didn't know that when I was outside. And the people in the prison advised me, if a legal team like Hannah Hose or James McGill, if they don't take your file when they've read it, don't expect any other solicitor to take your case against the state. Only those two companies will challenge the state.
Hanaho and McGill are amongst the top criminal defence solicitors in the country. And this is where they begin to come into this story.
I sent the same letter 3 times to the solicitor James McGill, asking for help. I sent 1 letter direct from the prison, but I thought maybe that letter won't get to him. So I also sent it to 2 friends of mine and asked them to go to his office, give him the letter and ask him to help me.
Okay, well, I'm James McGill. I'm a solicitor practicing in criminal defence, and I was approached to represent Sayeed, he having been convicted and imprisoned in circumstances where friends of his in his broader community were very concerned about the safety of that conviction.
Sayeed couldn't quite believe it when he got a response to his letters.
I remember him and his assistant coming to see me in jail. They met me, and I was crying, deeply sad. And he spoke to me, and he told me, I can't promise you the sky, but I will take your case. I will read it, and I will come back to you, and I will tell you the truth. But remember that it's not easily won, but we will try.
Sayeed got word to his wife that he had a new legal team and that she should get a new separate team, Hanaho Solicitors, which she did. It wasn't long before it became clear to the new legal teams that there were a number of grounds for appeal.
The first was that on reading the transcripts of the trial, it just looked like gibberish, because the questions didn't follow the answers and the answers didn't follow the questions. And we had to get to the bottom of that.
The second grounds for appeal was around the medical evidence and medical expert opinion given in the trial. Both solicitors spent the early part of 2020 seeking out a new medical expert in FGM for their defence. And then this happened.
Good morning, everyone. I need to speak to you about coronavirus and COVID-19. For the past few weeks, the government and our public service...
The lockdowns that happened across society in March 2020 hit harder in prison.
COVID was a really difficult time for prisoners, intensely difficult.
Former chaplain Claire Hargadon again.
For the most part, they were confined to their cells 23 hours a day. If you're in a room 23 hours a day with, one or two other people that you don't like or you don't have a good relationship with, it really brings you to the edge of your reason.
Throughout this time, Sayeed and Halawa had occasional conference calls with Tuzla social workers. It's really unusual for any family to have both parents in prison at the same time. This resulted in a complicated family life for Sayeed and Halawa's 3 young children. As child protection expert Shane Dunphy explains,
so when the parents are incarcerated, like I said, they do retain certain legal rights, such as the right to be consulted on significant decisions about their child where practicable. For example, the right to maintain in contact, the right to be informed about their child's welfare.
With their parents in jail, Tuzla were the legal guardians of Sayeed and Halawa's 3 children, all under the age of 5, even though they were in the full-time care of Halawa's sister and her husband.
They provide daily care and make the routine decisions, meals, bedtime, who does the homework, when they do the homework, do you need to go to the GP or whatever. But major decisions like medical procedures, school changes, whether or not the children can travel abroad, must go through Tuzla, who technically have the legal custody.
During the late spring and summer of 2020, prison didn't become any easier for Halawa. She continued getting a hard time.
One woman attacked me. She hit me in the head. Some people spit on you, saying things like what you did to your daughter. You cannot talk to anyone. If any woman talks to you, the other women say to her, "Oh, do you know what she did to her daughter? She cut her." They say it in front of you, and you cannot change anything.
Claire Hargadon remembers Halawa did her best to get on with things.
I remember her as quiet, as quite a compliant prisoner. She was willing to talk with me. She was faithful, and she was hardworking. She quickly progressed in her sentence and was put in a better accommodation, and the governor tried to accommodate her with other women of a similar background, which came with its own challenges as well, because just because you're all Muslims doesn't mean you're going to be best friends.
Despite her best efforts to get through it all, at one point, it became too much for Halawa, and a warning that this next passage has descriptions of attempted suicide.
One time, I was very upset. I remember I took a black scarf and I, went to go to the shower. I wanted to kill myself. I tied the scarf. I became a bit unconscious, but I woke up again.
When we asked the Irish Prison Service about Halawa's suicide attempt, they replied,
"In relation to any report of self-harm, details of any such incident are treated with the strictest of confidence, and it would not be appropriate to comment."
As that first year in prison passed, Sayeed found he only felt safe when he stayed with inmates of colour.
I learned the hard way. All the immigrant people of colour, we have to have a group. I get its support. If they go in the yard, I have to stay with those people because I can't go on my own. I will be bullied, shouted at, things thrown at me. I cannot be by myself. The first time they tried to attack me, was in a recreation area, like a hall, and everybody was playing cards. Somebody said something bad about FGM, and one of my prison group, he took his chair and fought for me to protect me. And after that day, they transferred him to another landing. They had to take him out of there.
Sayeed and Halawa went almost a year without having any contact with each other, before Sayeed's solicitor helped arrange the very first prisoner-to-prisoner video call in the Irish prison system.
I would have gone on to the governor and said, look, that this is a problem for them. They're in separate prisons. Clearly, it's an important right for any prisoner to be able to maintain family relations. And could an accommodation be put in place to allow them have better communication? And the prison service were happy to do that.
Prison life continued. COVID restrictions eased a little during the summer of 2020, and by that August, Sayeed and Halawa had spent over 250 days in prison for a crime, remember, that they keep saying never happened. In the outside world, their appeal against their convictions was beginning to get underway through the court system.
In this case, we were allowed to adduce new evidence for the purpose of the appeal because we made the case there was a real concern about the safety of the conviction, but normally you don't get that permission.
Regular hearings were being held as both solicitor firms tried to get a hearing date and access to material to help in their appeals. Things moved slowly, but there was a favourable reaction to Sayeed's grounds for appeal.
The court were already with us on the interpretation because they could see straight away that the standard was simply unacceptable. And judges are terrified, as you can imagine, to put people on trial when those people don't know what's going on and can't understand it, and when their evidence is misconstrued, not through anything that they've done wrong, but because the interpretation was suboptimal. And then, with the permission of the then President of the Court of Appeal, we got the audio recording of the evidence and the interpretation.
Getting these audio recordings of Sayeed and Halawa's trial was a real lifeline. It allowed the solicitors to bring in expert opinion regarding the translations. Dr. Mary Phelan from DCU was able to provide this, along with two colleagues, and together they listened back to the audio of the trial.
So sometimes it could be difficult to catch exactly what was said, so sometimes I'd have to slow down the recording to actually get every piece of information from it. And I drew up a table where it was clear, the one column contained the English from the transcript, one what was said by the interpreter, then what was said by the defendant, and all the translations. So that came to almost 150 pages of a huge big table, basically documenting everything. 150 pages is a lot of information, so we highlighted the cases that we thought were the most important, basically. So it would be clear to the judges at the Court of Appeal what exactly was going on and what was causing problems, basically, in the interpreting.
The second grounds for appeal in Sayeed and Halawa's conviction was going to be the diagnosis itself. Were the medical experts correct in saying FGM had taken place? Our reporters Pam and Tim can tell us more.
So the original medical expert brought in by Sayeed and Halawa's legal defence team for the first trial admitted he had no particular expertise in the area of FGM. He actually ended up agreeing with the prosecution's medical witnesses, all of whom said FGM had occurred. So Sayeed and Halawa never had the chance to have a different medical opinion presented during their trial.
And even after all this time, no FGM expert had ever physically examined Aisha. The prosecution witness, Dr. Hodes, never carried out a hands-on examination.
So Sayeed and Halawa's legal teams needed to find a world-class expert to examine Aisha.
Within Ireland, this is a unique case. And the expertise is not necessarily in Ireland in the hands of ordinary surgeons. It has to be a specialist. And there are board authorities that are published, peer-reviewed. You can get information about them. We do this in all sorts of disciplines, seeking experts in cases. And the search for a suitable expert turned up Professor Essen.
Professor Birgitta Essen is a world-renowned expert on FGM from Sweden. She would now become the new medical expert witness for the defence as they made their appeal, and Professor Essen's evidence would eventually turn this case upside down.
Ladies and gentlemen from the flight taker captain speaking. Warm welcome aboard this SAS and SkyTeam service to Stockholm.
Pam and I travelled to Uppsala, about 70 kilometres north of Stockholm in Sweden, hoping to meet with Professor Essen.
Estimated flight time 2 hours 15 minutes. Beautiful weather all the way.
Professor Essen has over 25 years' expertise in studying and diagnosing victims of FGM from newborn to adulthood, which makes her one of the preeminent global experts in this field.
It's December 2020 before Professor Essen reviews all the examinations and is able to give her first report based on all evidence to hand.
This is the part of the story that stops you in your tracks. Professor Essen read all the medical reports from the prosecution's medical experts, and she viewed all the videos taken of Aisha's injuries. Now she says that she wants to do her own physical examination of Aisha. But even just looking at the videos, her first report is loud and clear. There is no evidence of removal of any genital tissue.
In the simplest of terms, what Professor Essen is saying is that no FGM has taken place on Aisha.
Sayeed's legal team knew these findings were going to be explosive.
And that is another thing that terrifies courts, that a credible world authority was prepared to cast doubt on the scientific evidence relied on by the state. No judge wants somebody to serve a sentence for a crime that was not committed or following an unfair trial.
It was going to be another almost 12 months before Sayeed and Halawa's appeal would be heard. Everything hung in the balance.
I remember that day. It was the day in my soul and in my heart I was on the ground.
But this story was far from over. And that's where we're going in our 6th and final episode.
And all day I was crying. We have no justice. This is not fair.
First Conviction is narrated by me, Ruth Nega.
The series is written and produced by me, Tim Desmond.
And me, Liam O'Brien, working together with the RTE Investigates team.
Including me, reporter Pam Frere.
And me, producer-director Philip Gallagher.
The music is composed by me, Mel Mercier, and performed with Carl Nesbitt, Paul O'Donnell, Newell Tumbu, Clara Stanabras and the RTE Concert Orchestra, conducted by Gavin Maloney.
Sayeed's words are voiced by Steve Hartland.
And Halawa's words are voiced by Isosa Ighodaro.
Legal advice is from Deirdre Ann Kelly and Eleanor Blaheen.
And sound design is by me, Kieran Cullen.
If you've been affected by any issues raised in this episode, please visit rte.ie/helplines. Until next time, thanks for listening.